My grandmother taught me to read silence before she taught me to read words. She sat me on the cold stone sill of the cairn line watchpost, pointed at the valley where the fog pooled every morning like poured milk, and gave me the first rule of the quieting: nothing that matters ever announces itself. I was 6. I did not understand that she was handing me an inheritance 50,000 years old. By the time I stood watch myself, I understood it the way you understand your own bones. The quieting was not a wound Earth carried. It was a decision Earth made, and kept making, every day since the amaranth skein first came down through the ash-choked sky and declared the planet swept. Dead broadcasts, dead cities, dead species, filed and forgotten. They left a garrison of drones to confirm the silence for a few centuries, then left entirely. They never came back to check. The file was closed. What no scan of theirs ever caught was that the silence they recorded was the first brick in a wall that would take us 500 generations to finish. We did not rebuild loud. We rebuilt inward. Every watchpost on the cairn line, every buried foundry, every archive carved into granite, was raised without a single signal leaving the atmosphere. My grandmother's grandmother had stood this same post with a rifle and a ledger, teaching her daughter the same 3 rules I later taught my own apprentice: watch, remember, say nothing. Across 50,000 years, no one broke the discipline. Not once. That is the part people from other worlds never believe when I tell it. Not the technology, the patience. The training was never abstract. Each generation inherited the exact posture of the watchers before them, the same habit of standing with weight on the back foot, the same way of reading cloud cover for what it hid rather than what it showed. My grandmother used to say the post itself remembered, even when the people manning it changed, because discipline passed hand to hand becomes a kind of mind that outlives any single body holding it. I did not understand that fully until I was the one holding it. So when the sensors under the cairn line woke me at 0300 on the last ordinary morning of my life and told me something enormous had entered high orbit reading no transponder, following an approach vector logged in files older than my birth, I did not feel fear. I felt the whole weight of that inheritance settle onto my shoulders, and understood, finally, in my body, and not just my training, why every watcher before me had kept the silence so carefully. It had never been for hiding. It had been for this exact morning. I climbed to the ridge with my mentor, Corvin Adair, a man who had held this post 40 of his 60 years, and never once raised his voice on comm. We watched the sky go the wrong color as the Skeins reclamation swarm came down through the high cloud. Not warships, not conquerors, but a slow tide of collector vessels, moving with the eerie unison of a single mind, wearing 10,000 bodies. They were not coming to fight anyone. They were coming to harvest a corpse. That was the arrogance in every line of their approach. They expected nothing below to resist, because 50,000 years ago, the file had said nothing below could. Corvin watched them a long while before he spoke. They still think the silence was the wound, he said. Watch what happens when they learn it was the scar tissue. The first collector vessel put down in the low valley where my grandmother once pointed at the fog. It was not sleek. It had the look of something grown rather than machined. Ribbed hull plates the color of old bone, fused at the seams the way scar tissue fuses over a wound. A species that builds its ships like living things, thinks in terms of what breathes and what does not, which was why the file about us had lasted 50,000 years unchallenged. Its landing legs unfolded with a soft, confident hiss, and something in the Skeins' collective awareness, a single consciousness poured across 10,000 vessels, the way a river is poured into 10,000 small channels, reached out to inventory the ground beneath it. It found the mountain was hollow. Not hollow in the way a ruin is hollow the way a loaded weapon is hollow, built around a purpose. The cairn line was not a mountain range with defenses hidden inside it. It was a defense grid that had grown a mountain range as camouflage, layer over layer, generation over generation, until stone and steel and root system were no longer separate things. The skeins drones touched down on slopes that were, in truth, armored plating with grass grown over them, and extended collector arms toward soil engineered, centuries before any of them were hatched, to read as dead earth and nothing more. I watched the moment it changed for them, a hitch in their formation, a half-second where every vessel in the valley froze at once, because a single mind cannot lie to itself the way a divided one can. They understood together, instantly, that the file they had trusted for 50,000 years was wrong, and had been wrong since the hour their ancestors closed it. Corvin gave the order that had been sitting ready since before either of us was born. It was not an order to destroy, it was an order to answer. The cairn line opened. I will not pretend it was gentle. Weapons platforms that had waited 500 generations for a single morning do not wait quietly. The valley floor became a lattice of light, precise and terrible, taking apart the vanguard's landing legs and collector arms without touching a single occupied hull. We had not spent 50,000 years building a hammer. We had spent it building a hand, steady enough to choose exactly how hard to close. 3 collector vessels tried to lift and run. We let 2 go. The third we held, gently, in a containment field built for exactly this purpose, and never once used until that hour. And inside it, the skeins' local awareness screamed across its own collective mind, in a way no translator on Earth had ever recorded, because no one had ever given them a reason to scream like that. We did not kill what we did not have to kill. That was the discipline too, not just patience in the waiting, but restraint in the answering. Corvin stood at the edge of the ridge while the valley finished settling, and told the trapped vessel, through a broad-spectrum channel our ancestors had kept maintained for 50,000 years, on the chance it would ever matter, exactly what it needed to carry home, that the file was closed in error, that the silence had been chosen, not suffered, and that the world it came to harvest had spent longer preparing for this morning than the skeins' entire collective memory could account for. Then he opened the field and let it go. I watched it climb out through the smoke, engines uneven, its collective mind still reeling from what it had just been shown. It did not fire on the way out. It did not circle back for its 2 escaped companions. It simply left, the way something leaves once it understands the size of the mistake it is standing in, and the sky closing over it looked exactly the same as it had at 0300 that morning, as if the whole encounter had left no mark on the world at all. That too was the discipline. Nothing that matters ever announces itself, not even its ending. It cost Corvin, though, not the fight. That cost him nothing he could not afford. It was the choosing that cost him, standing there with his hands steady on the release, sending home a piece of the very force that had made the quieting necessary in the first place. Mercy like that is not free. It draws on the same discipline as the waiting did, and discipline spent, that precisely leaves a mark on the one spending it. I saw it settle into him on that ridge, and never fully leave, the way a scar settles into skin that has otherwise healed clean. I buried Corvin 11 years later, an old man by then, in the same valley the collector vessel had tried and failed to harvest. I did not put a marker with his name on it. That was never our way. I put a stone, unremarkable, facing the sky had come down through, and let the grass grow over it, the way the grass had always grown over what mattered, on the cairn line. By then, I had an apprentice of my own, and I sat her on that same cold sill and told her the same 3 rules my grandmother gave me, in the same quiet voice, over the same morning fog. She asked me once why we kept the silence going, now that the sken had already learned the truth. I told her what Corvin would have told her, that a file corrected once does not mean it will not be written again, by someone else, somewhere else, who never heard what happened here. The discipline was never about one morning. It was about being the kind of world that is always ready for the next one, whether it comes in 50 years or 50,000. Watch, remember, say nothing. The skein has not come back. I do not know if they ever will, but if they do, They will not find a silence to mistake for weakness. They will find a silence that has been listening to them for 50,000 years, patient as stone, ready this time as every time before it, long before the sky ever changed color.